So two new bombshells entered the villa this weekend called Backrooms and Obsession. Okay, now Obsession obviously has been around for a couple weeks. It's kind of just really growing and growing. But Backrooms hit the box office this weekend, opening to 81 million domestic box office. And it's just absolutely beating out all expectations. It's really generating a lot of discussion and a lot of hype. And I've been following the box office since I was like 13 years old. I've always had some weird obsession with like keeping up with the box office. If you would like for me to start a weekly box office show, please hit me up in the comments. I would gladly do that, but I want to see if there's an audience. But I really wanted to break down exactly what's happening here, because you hear a lot of talk about like, this is a repeat of the 70s peak of horror boom, and I actually find a lot of really interesting things to be said about that. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. So in the 70s, you hear this all the time, that there was a big horror boom. All these classic horror movies that I'm going to put up here, because I don't have them named off the top of my head, came out in the 70s. That was really kind of the era and the beginning of the slasher. Now, this has a lot to do with like ratings and what they were allowed to do in films and stuff, and I want to make that clear as well. That's not something I'm super well versed around. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of horror fanatics out there that really know what they're talking about when it comes to that. I'm just more of a general film fan. I don't know the specifics when it came to things like that. But in the 70s, it really became a lot of like low-budget horror films really started to take it off. That was also when the industry was like really kind of changing shape in general. Film, I think we often forget, is like it's a tech industry a little bit, and the reason so many people went to films in the 50s and the 60s is largely attributed to the fact that it was like a new thing. You know, I mean, like, that's why we count box office adjusted for inflation, because if we didn't account it for inflation, you know, you had the initial boom of film that really swept everywhere. You know, there was 3D that was kind of a little bit implemented just a little bit in places. That was kind of a new element of technology that was reintroduced. And then you also had talkies, which are like films with dialogue. So you'd have kind of this series of technological inventions really leading up into like the 60s and the 70s, and that kind of started to wear off a little bit. People stopped going to films necessarily for the novelty of it. There was a lot of films that were really story-based that were lower budget. When you're not making a film meant to inspire awe, you know, you're making it more for stories. Of course, it's going to make sense to have a lesser budget. And those are the films that were really booming, and that was keeping the film industry alive, because there was a subsect of people that were going to watch the movies really generally for that like story. And also, I want to make it clear, I say that in horror itself is this kind of like filmmaking worth of awe, you know, it has, but it's a different way. It's more of like shock value horror, and that's kind of really what was presented in this. So I want to make it clear, it's not like this is a little bit of an oversimplification. At the same time, like I said, there was a lot to do with ratings, which is why horror became a boom in the 70s. But also, IP and big budget story films still survived. I know that there's like a lot of discussion, a lot of people rooting for like IP and these story-based films to fall and to never happen again, and for us to never get another sequel, but I hate to break it to you, that's not a new issue. Now, granted, it has absolutely been explosive in the last couple of years, and I think a lot of people want a lot less of it, but let's not act like there haven't always been sequels. But I think as you enter a new generation of filmmakers, you know, and film moviegoers, like Gen Z goes to the box office a lot, watch my video that I made on that, nostalgia and IP isn't going to work when there is no nostalgia or IP for that generation. So again, it's another similar situation where it's really this original film boost. And also, the 70s slasher film was really kind of an antithesis to a lot of the films that were being made prior, just in terms of rating. You know, people wanted more edgier films, more things like that didn't play it safe as much. And again, I also think you see that correlation happening right now when it comes to films. My correlation is that I think CGI really was kind of like that for our generation. You know, CGI really made a boom. That's why, you know, you saw Marvel movies come up and all these stories you couldn't tell without CGI being heavily involved. And I think, again, it was great. I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe was a perfect case of like a story that was just waiting for CGI to be invented and then finally could get told. But of course, like everything else, it kind of got overrun by, you know, people who were relying so much on the CGI that the story kind of took a back seat. And I think now we're kind of like going in the complete opposite direction, which is, again, I think very similar to kind of the paradigm shift that happened in the 70s when it came to horror as well. Because horror at this time was really proof in the start that audiences wanted different stories. They wanted something that was new. Again, because film is every art form, everything has dealt with people just wanting something new. You know, this isn't just a film situation. You know, and so you kind of stay stuck on a place for so long that there's an extreme opposite end of that. And right now, again, that's horror. That slow burn horror is really attracting people who are kind of tired of like this quick, I'm going to be a YouTuber real quick and say the TikTokification of cinema. You know, I think people are really tired of that. And I think they're running in the opposite direction of that. And I'm very interested to see, again, not that those films aren't doing well. And I want to make that clear. Not that I'm not rooting for them. I'm very excited about upcoming movies like Spider-Man, Dune 3, you know, just some animated films. I'm just really excited about those bigger IP films as well, just as much as I am about some new and original films as well. I'm probably more so than most people. I'm not even a huge horror guy. I want to make that clear. I just like love film and love seeing how horror has almost always kind of been at the forefront of reshaping the genre, because it's always been groundbreaking and what's new and exciting and pushing the edge of the envelope, and been a place that's okay for it and has an audience of people who are okay with that and are really just valuing the story rather than the shock value and judging it and basing it off of those things, I think that you're seeing that happen again. And so I want to look at kind of where I think film is going to go, especially because of this. Because like I said, IP big films still survived, and IP big films are still doing great. Let's not act like Project Hail Mary didn't do blockbuster numbers. Okay, like that, I think people don't understand the insanity of the box office run of that film as well. $80 million opening weekend for an original movie. Yes, it's based off of a book, but still kind of an original film. That was insane. And again, that's kind of where you see that like kind of 80s movies mix come into the play, whereas like I think could be our future for cinema, where it's like films that still push the edge of the envelope visually and with what they're trying to do, but yet have a lot of heart and have a lot of character. Project Hail Mary, I think, is really, in my opinion, a great comp for the future of cinema, and I think Backrooms and Obsession is very much what's happening right now. Because a healthy box office has both. You need those big blockbuster crowd pleasers, but you also need those small independent films. But you also just need films to be good. You need all of those things to be good. Because if you're only bringing out most people when you have those big blockbusters, they still have to leave the movie theaters having a great time in order to come back. It can't just be the cinephiles and the people who go to the movies all the time who have a great experience trying to get everybody else to come back, because that just won't work, because that always happens and they're always going to be your target audience. You have to really work on making those blockbusters and those big, huge films hit. And I think the small blockbuster that's kind of happening, emerging right now, is a great example of that. I really think what's going on with film right now, and a comp that I realized, and really was honestly the inspiration for this video, is that what TikTok did for the music industry. And I think YouTube is going to do for filmmakers as TikTok did for musicians. Again, better or worse, you started to also have TikTokers make music for the algorithm. And I think there's inevitably going to be a rise of people making short films for the idea of turning them into original films. You see a lot of similarities there, and I think that that's exciting. Honestly, I'm nervous, like I said, in terms of how that's going to turn movies into. I hope movies don't become things to just be clipped to put on YouTube. So I really think like the future we have is a very good future for film, with the added new caveat of things such as YouTube filmmakers, which again though, while it's just a new iteration of it, the 70s also had a boom of new original horror creators as well. The way that we're discovering those new original creators is different. Even the independent film cycle was changing for the time that it was created. So now that there's even a new way to have an independent film cycle, I think it's just really retreading a lot of stuff, and I think that's very exciting, not even just for small films. Like I said, I'm not even a huge horror fan. For blockbusters in general, I think that I see a very like kind of 80s mix, and I think that's really exciting. So let me know what you think down below. Can't wait to talk to you next week. Let me know if you want me to start covering the box office, because I gladly will. It's like fantasy football for film people. I eat it up all the time. And yeah, peace out.